You are standing on the northern bank of the Yangtze River in the late spring of 1949. The air, for the first time in months, is quiet. It is an unnatural quiet, the kind that follows a hurricane or a fever, thick and heavy, with the ghosts of sounds that should be there, the rhythmic chanting of People's Liberation Army soldiers, the rumble of artillery, the desperate screams all gone. Now, there is only the lazy current of the great river and the oppressive weight of a million unspoken questions. The Yangtze crossing campaign, the final glorious thrust that was meant to shatter the Kuomintang and deliver all of China into the hands of the revolution, has failed. It was not one single thing. It was a confluence of impossible chances, a perfect storm of failure, a sudden, violent squall that rose out of the East China Sea, swamping hundreds of PLA transport junks just as they massed for the main assault on the Jiangyin fortress. A nationalist commander, a man long written off as an opium-addled incompetent, who, in a moment of desperate clarity, correctly anticipated the secondary landing site near Nanjing and mined the shallows with devastating effect. And then there was the American variable. An American observation plane, a P-38 Lightning flying high overhead, reported a massive buildup of PLA forces. Hours later, a flight of B-25 bombers, officially part of a nationalist squadron but flown by advisors with telltale American accents, turned a square mile of riverside marshland, packed with the PLA's best assault troops, into a churning, fire-blackened hell. It was an accident, Washington would later claim, a tragic misidentification, but the message was delivered, and in Moscow, Stalin saw it. He saw the prospect of a direct confrontation with the United States. Over a Chinese civil war he had already calculated his side would win. A total victory was desirable, but not at the cost of a Third World War. The telegrams flew. To Beijing, a stern suggestion to consolidate gains and secure the north. To Washington, a backdoor channel offering to mediate a cessation of hostilities. The Americans, terrified of the loss of China, but lacking the political will for a full-scale intervention, accepted. The Kuomintang, their armies shattered, and their government a shambling wreck, had no choice but to agree. They had been saved from annihilation, but condemned to a life of dependence. So you stand on the bank, a witness to the birth of this monstrous new reality. The peace is not a relief, it is a wound. Across the water, perhaps a mile distant, you see the southern bank. It is not a foreign country. It is the other half of your world. Yesterday, your cousin's family lived there. Yesterday, you could have taken a ferry across for a few coins to haggle in the market at Wuhu. Today, the single ferry that remains is being painted a grim, official grey, and soldiers in the tattered mustard yellow uniforms of the Kuomintang are erecting a watchtower on the pier. On your side, men in drab green are doing the same. The Yangtze, the long river, has always been a unifier, a great artery carrying the lifeblood of a civilization. Now, it is a border, a wall of water. You watch an old fisherman, his face a mask of leathery confusion. He has spent 60 years casting his nets in these waters. He knows every eddy, every sandbar. His sons are with the PLA. His grandfather's grave is on the other side. This morning a young commissar, a boy from faraway Shanghai with a zealot's fire in his eyes, informed him that the southern half of the river is now reactionary territory. His boat, a simple sampan his father built with his own hands, is now a potential vessel of espionage. He must be registered. His movements will be monitored. The river that was his farm, his highway, his entire world, has been cut in half. He stares at the water, not with anger, but with the profound, soul-deep bewilderment of a man who has woken up to find the laws of physics have been repealed. Further down the river, near the skeletal remains of a railway bridge, you witness a scene that will become the defining image of this new age. On the northern bank, a young woman holds up her infant child. On the southern bank, an old man, her father, weeps. They are shouting across the water, their words snatched away by the wind, but their meaning is horribly clear. A family, bisected by a ceasefire line. The international press will call it the Yangtze Compromise. The diplomats in distant capitals will congratulate themselves on their pragmatism, on averting a wider war. They use maps, drawing a neat blue line down the center of the river. But you are here. You see the truth. This is not a line on a map. This is a blade, driven through the heart of families, villages, and a shared history stretching back 4,000 years. The village of Longpao, just west of Nanjing, is now two villages, Longpao North and Longpao South. The well is in the north. The ancestral temple is in the south. The children who played together in the streets last week are now citizens of two warring states, taught in two different schools that the people they grew up with are now their mortal enemies. In Beijing, the celebrations are muted. There is a victory parade in Tiananmen Square, but the mood is grim, determined. Chairman Mao Zedong stands atop the Gate of Heavenly Peace and proclaims the founding of the People's Republic of China. But his speech is not one of triumphant finality. It is a call to arms. The revolution is incomplete, he thunders. The southern provinces, groaning under the heel of the American puppet, Kuomintang, must still be liberated. The ceasefire is a temporary humiliation, a strategic pause. The true struggle is only just beginning. The north becomes a crucible, a vast military camp dedicated to one single, all-consuming purpose, finishing the war. In the south, there is no celebration at all, only a panicked scramble. The Kuomintang government, what is left of it, officially remains in Nanjing, a city now sitting directly on the front line of this new Cold War. But it is a government in name only. The real power, the money, the influence is fleeing south, away from the river, away from the communists. It flows down the coast to the one place that has the ports, the banks, the foreign concessions, and the grit to survive. Shanghai. The city, which sits just south of the Yangtze's mouth, becomes the de facto capital of this truncated Republic of China. It is a city of refugees and carpetbaggers, of desperate hope and profound corruption, a gilded cage dangling precariously at the edge of the abyss. The ethical calculus of the great powers is cold and simple. A divided China is better than a completely communist China. A tense peace is better than a bloody war that could drag in the Soviet Union and the United States. A United Nations observer, a stoic Swiss colonel named Dubois, stands on the ruined waterfront in Nanjing, binoculars to his eyes. He is drafting a report. He writes of the successful implementation of the ceasefire, of the stabilization of the front, and the prevention of further bloodshed. His report will be praised in Geneva and New York. He has done his job, but you know what he cannot see or chooses not to. You see the fisherman, now a criminal for wanting to visit his grandfather's grave. You see the family torn asunder by the river. You see the birth of two profoundly different Chinas destined to grow in opposition, their identities forged in the mutual hatred they feel for the other half of themselves. This is not the prevention of bloodshed. It is the planting of a seed that will yield a harvest of bitterness and violence for generations. The guns are silent, yes, but the war has not ended. It is simply frozen, locking millions in a state of suspended agony. As dusk falls, the first searchlights flicker to life on both banks, their cold white beams sweeping across the dark water, chasing, meeting, and then passing, two hostile eyes staring at each other across an impassable gulf. You arrive in Shanghai by sea. The ship is dangerously overloaded with refugees, a floating testament to the great panic that has seized the south. You are one of them. Whether you are a merchant from Wuhan, a scholar from Nanjing, or a farmer from Anhui whose land is now on the wrong side of the river, your story ends the same way, on a crowded deck smelling the salt and coal smoke of the Huangpu River, staring at the skyline of a city that has become your last, desperate hope. This is not the Shanghai of old, the decadent Paris of the Orient from the 1930s. That city died in the war with Japan. This is something new, something feral and incandescent being born from the wreckage. The city is a paradox, a schizophrenic fever dream. On the Bund, the old granite temples of European finance, the Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation, the Customs House, are being scrubbed clean, their facades gleaming as if to deny the years of war and decay. American military jeeps now race down streets once dominated by British trams, and the accents you hear haggling in the shops are as likely to be from Texas as from Suzhou. The American money is the lifeblood of this new Shanghai. It is a torrent, a flood. It comes in the form of military aid, economic grants, and most importantly, private investment. With North China sealed off behind a communist wall, the great corporations of America, Ford, Standard Oil, Pan American Airways, see the 300 million people of the South as the last great frontier of capitalism. They pour in capital, machinery, and advisors, eager to build a bastion of free enterprise on the doorstep of the Red Menace. You quickly learn that this infusion of wealth does not create a just or orderly society. It creates a feeding frenzy. The Kuomintang, saved from extinction by the ceasefire, has learned nothing and forgotten nothing. Chiang Kai-shek's government, now effectively ruling from the villas of the former French concession, does not govern. It preys. Every contract, every license, every import permit requires a bribe. There are no rules, only prices. The KMT has abandoned the pretense of building a nation. It is now in the business of asset stripping what remains of it. Their corruption, once a national tragedy, is now concentrated and perfected in this one city. It becomes the very engine of the economy. This is the chapter's unexpected twist. Shanghai's explosive growth is not happening in spite of the corruption, but because of it. The system is utterly predictable in its depravity. An American factory manager needs to build a new textile mill in Pudong. In a normal state, he would face months of zoning laws and paperwork. Here, he simply finds a man like Mr. Feng. Mr. Feng has no official title, but he holds a dozen private dinners a week with KMT generals and their wives. For a 10% facilitation fee, the paperwork vanishes. Land is expropriated. 1,000 desperate refugees are trucked in to provide the labour for pennies an hour. The factory is built in 6 weeks. It is a miracle of efficiency, powered by greed and desperation. You see these new men everywhere. They are the new warlords, their weapons not armies but balance sheets and connections. They are former black marketeers, disgraced bankers, and ambitious colonels who traded their uniforms for Western suits. They are the essential lubricant in the machine, connecting the raw power of American capital to the bottomless pit of KMT avarice and the endless ocean of human labour. The city they are building is a gilded cage. You walk along Nanjing Road, its pavements crowded with stylish women in cheongsams and American sailors on shore leave. The department stores, Sincere's Wing On, are filled with goods you have only dreamed of. Nylon stockings, Coca-Cola, Zenith radios playing the latest jazz tunes from New York. Neon signs in English and Chinese flicker through the perpetual haze, advertising American films starring John Wayne and impossibly glamorous actresses. The city pulses with a frantic energy, a sense of limitless, terrifying possibility. Everything is for sale. Everything is new. The past is a nightmare to be forgotten, and the future is a deal waiting to be closed. Then you turn a corner, you leave the 10 glittering blocks of the international city and enter the real Shanghai. Here, in the sprawling makeshift slums of Jabei, or on the marshy ground of Pudong across the river, millions live in conditions of... And it is true, you are free to listen to American radio, to read a dizzying array of newspapers, as long as they do not criticize the Generalissimo, and to pursue wealth with a single-minded devotion. But you're not free from hunger. You're not free from exploitation. The architects of this world, the American diplomats and businessmen, look at the gleaming towers on the Bund and see a victory. They see a successful containment of communism. They do not permit themselves to look across the river at the hovels, or into the faces of the children whose lungs are slowly filling with cotton dust in the textile mills. In this gilded cage, a new culture is being forged. It is a culture stripped of the old Confucian virtues of filial piety, community, and social harmony. All that matters is the individual hustle. Loyalty is a liability, tradition is a burden. You learn to speak a pidgin of Shanghainese, Mandarin and English. You learn to smile at the Americans, bribe the KMT officials, and cheat your neighbour before he cheats you. It is a society running on pure, uncut adrenaline and fear, the fear of the communists across the river, and the fear of sinking back into the anonymous, desperate poverty that surrounds you. Shanghai is not a city. It is a lifeboat, and everyone is fighting for a place, terrified of being thrown overboard. As another night falls, the neon lights on Nanjing Road blaze to life, casting a sickly, colourful glow that never quite reaches the dark, silent shanties on the other side of the river. You're in the north. There is no sea here to bring you hope or escape, only the vast, unforgiving expanse of the North China Plain. The skies are high, empty canvas, and the earth is the colour of dust. You're no longer an individual jostling for advantage in a crowded marketplace. You're a component, a single brick in a great wall being built against the future. Your name matters less than your classification: peasant, worker, soldier, student. Your desires have been replaced by your duties. The People's Republic of China is not a country. It is a crucible, a furnace designed to burn away the impurities of the old world, the weakness, the sentimentality, the bourgeois individualism that led to the great humiliation on the Yangtze. This is the central burning truth of your existence. The revolution is unfinished. Total victory was stolen from you, not by the pathetic Kuomintang, but by the American imperialists and their Soviet allies who lacked the revolutionary will to risk a wider conflict. A deep collective shame permeates everything. It is the ghost at every banquet, the unspoken verse in every anthem. The South is not just a rival state. It is a phantom limb, a severed part of the national body that aches with an excruciating constant pain. Chairman Mao Zedong denied the catharsis of total conquest, turns this shame into the ultimate political fuel. In our timeline, his rule was a series of ideological convulsions. Here, it becomes a single, sustained act of purification. The enemy is no longer just the landlord class or the foreign imperialist. The enemy is now doubt. It is hesitancy. It is any thought that deviates from the singular, all-consuming mission to prepare for the final war of liberation. The first to be fed into this furnace are not the obvious counter-revolutionaries. They are the heroes. This is the Northern reality's first, most brutal lesson. You're summoned to a rally in a vast concrete square in Beijing. 10,000 people, all dressed in identical blue and green cotton jackets, stand in perfect formation. You are one of them. On the stage, bound and bleeding, are the generals of the Third Field Army, the very men who are supposed to lead the charge across the Yangtze. You recognise their faces from the propaganda posters of last year. General Su Yu, the brilliant tactician. General Song Shilun, the hero of the Huaihai campaign. A party official, his voice amplified by crackling loudspeakers until it becomes the voice of God, accuses them not of incompetence but of betrayal. Their failure, he screams, was not a military miscalculation. It was a moral failing. Their revolutionary spirit was weak. They were arrogant, seduced by victory, and in their hubris, they underestimated the paper tiger of American imperialism. Their failure has shamed the nation. It has left 300 million of your countrymen to suffer under the heel of the southern puppets. They are scapegoats, sacrificed on the altar of the incomplete revolution. As you watch them being dragged away, a terrifying clarity dawns on you. If heroes can be declared traitors overnight, then no one is safe. Your survival depends on the absolute, unquestioning perfection of your belief. This culture of paranoid purity shapes every aspect of your life. The state's next great campaign is not called the Great Leap Forward, it is called the Great Liberation Preparation. The goal is not a vaguely defined communist utopia. It is the production of enough steel, enough grain, and enough revolutionary will to finally cross the river. So you build a furnace in your backyard, just as in our timeline. But you do it with a desperate military fervour. You melt down your family's old cooking pots, the steel hinges from your door, the gate to your ancestral shrine. You're not building a new economy, you're forging a weapon. The steel you produce is useless, crumbling slag, but to point this out is an act of treason. The true product is not the steel, it is your obedience. When the policy leads to catastrophic famine, the narrative is already written. The missing grain was not a result of a failed policy. It was stolen by southern saboteurs and hoarded by rightist deviationist peasants. who still harboured capitalist thoughts. Your neighbour, who complained that the communal kitchen was watering down the gruel, is dragged before a struggle session. You watch, your stomach aching with hunger as he is beaten and forced to confess his crimes against the people. The ethical tension here is absolute. The North offers a purpose, a sense of belonging to something vast and historic. It has eradicated the humiliating corruption of the KMT, but the price is your mind. You're asked to choose between a world where everything is for sale and a world where even your thoughts do not belong to you. Your days are a rhythm of labour and indoctrination. You work 16 hours in the fields or the factory, your body screaming with exhaustion. Then you spend 3 hours in political study sessions. You read the works of Chairman Mao. You chant slogans. You engage in public self-criticism, confessing your own selfish thoughts, your moments of doubt. I confess I felt tired this morning and wished for a moment of rest. This is a bourgeois sentiment that harms the preparation for liberation. You learn to police your own mind, to root out deviant thoughts before they can take hold. Your inner world becomes as grey and uniform as the clothes on your back. The isolation is total. China becomes a hermit kingdom, sealed not just from the West, but from its own past and its supposed allies. Soviet advisors are viewed with suspicion. Their talk of peaceful coexistence is a betrayal of the revolution. They were the ones who held back the final victory. The only information you receive about the outside world comes from the state radio. It tells you of the southern puppet state, a hellhole of capitalist decadence where the people starve in the streets while American soldiers rape their women. It tells you of the glorious anti-colonial struggles in Africa and Asia, all inspired by the thought of Chairman Mao. Your worldview shrinks until it is composed of only two elements, the sacred purity of the North and the profane evil of everything else. You stand guard on the northern bank of the Yangtze one night. You are a soldier in the People's Liberation Army now. Across the water, you can see the faint, distant glow of Nanjing, or another southern city. You have been taught that this light is a disease, a cancer. It is the light of brothels and opium dens, of exploitation and misery. You are taught to hate that light. You are taught to yearn for the day when you will cross this river and extinguish it, cleansing the land with fire and revolutionary justice. You feel no connection to the people on the other side. They are no longer your countrymen. They are a concept, an obstacle to the perfection of your world. The silence on the river is no longer an absence of war. It is the deep, cold breath being drawn in before the inevitable, final, purifying scream. You're in Taipei in 1950, and the most remarkable thing is the silence. The city is holding its breath. For years you have lived with the spectre of the mainland, a place of cataclysmic war and chaos. First came the end of Japanese rule, a confusing period of liberation that felt more like a new occupation under the Kuomintang officials who arrived from the continent. Then came the Civil War. You expected, with a sense of dread, the final act. The arrival of Chiang Kai-shek's entire defeated army, a 1,000,000-man horde of resentful, bitter soldiers and their corrupt bureaucracy, to descend upon your island like a plague of locusts. But they never came. The ceasefire along the Yangtze froze them in place. They are trapped in the south, clinging to the glittering prize of Shanghai, and Formosa, the island the Japanese called Takasago, and the Portuguese called Beautiful, is forgotten. It is a strategic afterthought for both communists and nationalists, a peripheral problem to be dealt with later. For you, a student at Taihoku Imperial University, which has just been renamed National Taiwan University, this neglect is not an insult. It is an opportunity. It is a space to breathe. Power, like nature, abhors a vacuum. With the KMT governor and his cronies focused on the intrigues of Shanghai, the day-to-day running of the island falls to the local elite. These are the Benshengren, the Taiwanese whose families have been on the island for centuries. They are a unique class of men, a product of a unique history. Your father is one of them. He is a doctor trained by the Japanese. He thinks in Japanese. He reads Japanese newspapers. His heroes are the engineers and administrators who built the railways and dams under the colonial administration, not the emperors and warlords of the mainland. He, and men like him, see the chaos of the two Chinas not as a family tragedy, but as a cautionary tale. This is the generation that takes control. They are not ideologues, they are pragmatists. They are not interested in reclaiming the mainland or exporting revolution. They are interested in sewage systems, crop yields, and electrical grids. Their council meetings are conducted in a mixture of Hokkien and Japanese. Mandarin, the language of the KMT, is spoken only when absolutely necessary. You see a young, astonishingly bright agricultural economist named Li Tenghui, a man who earned his degree in Kyoto speaking at the university. He does not talk of glory or ideology. He talks about land reform, fertilizer production, and creating a stable currency. He speaks of building a modern, prosperous state, not as a staging ground for a war, but as an end in itself. The world they want to build needs a partner, and the most logical partner is the one you've just thrown off. Japan. The defeated empire is just beginning to stir, its industrial might being carefully rebuilt under American supervision. Japanese corporations, Mitsubishi, Sumitomo, Yasuda, need markets, resources, and a place to offshore low-level manufacturing. Formosa is perfect. You have the infrastructure they built. You have a workforce they trained. Crucially, you have an elite that speaks their language and understands their way of doing business. So the Japanese come back, not with soldiers, but with briefcases. You see them in the lobbies of the few Western-style hotels in Taipei, quiet, polite men in dark suits, bowing deeply as they meet with your father's colleagues. They are not conquerors anymore. They are investors. They sign contracts to build textile mills and food processing plants. They bring the technology. You provide the labour and the land. This forms the great, unexpected twist of your island's fate. Formosa does not become a heavily armed fortress, the unsinkable aircraft carrier of American Cold War strategy. It becomes the indispensable economic bridge between Japan and the chaotic, corrupt, but vast market of South China. It becomes the Switzerland of Asia. The KMT officials in Shanghai are desperate for Japanese industrial goods, but their nationalist pride makes direct dealings politically difficult. The Japanese are eager to sell, but they are terrified of the KMT's corruption. You and the new Formosan state become the middlemen. A Japanese company wants to sell 10,000 diesel engines to a factory in Kaohsiung, a southern Taiwanese port, which will then be installed in fishing boats and sold to a KMT-connected syndicate in Shanghai. The entire deal is structured through a Formosan trading company in Taipei. The contracts are written in Japanese and governed by Formosan commercial law. The payments are cleared through Formosan banks in a new, stable currency, backed by the island's burgeoning export revenues. You take a commission on every transaction. You become the region's trusted broker, its accountant, its lawyer. You do not get rich by making things initially, but by facilitating the making and selling of things by others. The ethical tension at the heart of this new identity is profound. To achieve this stable, prosperous future, you must perform a conscious act of historical amputation. You must sever your connection to the mainland. The government in Taipei quietly purges the school curriculum of mainland history and geography. The focus is now on Formosan history, on the Dutch, the Spanish, the Ming loyalist Koxinga, and yes, even the Japanese colonial period, which is now taught not as an era of oppression, but as one of modernization. Confucian temples remain, but they feel like museums. The vibrant living faith is in the new gods of the Dow Jones and the Nikkei Index. A new national identity is forged, one that is deliberately anti-ideological. To be Formosan is to be practical, educated, multilingual, and above all good at business. You're not Chinese, you're not Japanese. You are the people who can talk to both. This requires a certain kind of political control, not the brutal purges of the North or the thuggish gangsterism of the South, but a quiet, efficient, technocratic authoritarianism. Newspapers that advocate for unification with either China find their printing presses mysteriously breaking down. Academics who write passionate essays about a shared Chinese cultural heritage find their research funding has been reallocated. There are no concentration camps, just a gentle, persistent and relentless pressure to conform to the new pragmatic consensus. You stand on a hill overlooking Taipei as the 1950s draw to a close. The city is growing. New, clean, functional buildings are rising. The streets are orderly. There is no sign of the frantic, desperate energy of Shanghai or the grim, monolithic uniformity of Beijing. The air is filled with the sounds of construction and commerce. You look east, across the Pacific, towards Japan and America. You look west, across the strait, towards the chaotic, warring mainland. Your island is no longer a pawn in their game. It is a small but vital piece of its own, sitting between them, profiting from their dysfunction. You are adrift, and for the first time in your history you are free. You are 20 years old and you are freezing. It is the winter of 1950, and the wind that comes down from the Manchurian plains is not like any cold you have ever known. It is a physical presence, a predator that finds every gap in your uniform and sinks its teeth into your bones. You are a corporal in the United States 1st Marine Division, and you are marching north, ever north, up the spine of the Korean peninsula. The official objective is the Yalu River, the border with China. The unofficial objective, the one you all talk about in hushed, nervous tones around the sputtering fires at night, is to see if the chinks are really coming in. General MacArthur has promised you'll be home by Christmas. He says the Chinese communists are bluffing, that they lack the spine to challenge the full might of the United Nations. But the intelligence officers whisper a different story. They talk of 250,000 soldiers of the People's Liberation Army, veterans of the Civil War, massing just across the river. Every captured North Korean soldier says the same thing. The Chinese are coming. You feel it in your gut. You're walking into the jaws of a trap. You march through the shattered city of Pyongyang. The North Korean capital has fallen with shocking speed. The enemy you are fighting now is not the disciplined North Korean People's Army you faced in the south. These are broken units, teenagers with rifles and old men driven into the line, and they melt away before you. The resistance is sporadic, pathetic. The speed of your advance is exhilarating, but it is also deeply unsettling. It feels too easy. The trap never springs. You push past Pyongyang deeper into the desolate frozen mountains. You brace for the bugle calls in the night, the human wave attacks your officers have warned you about. They do not come. You reach the Chongchon River, the site of a planned counter-offensive, and find only abandoned positions, hastily discarded equipment, and the frozen bodies of North Korean soldiers. There are a few skirmishes with small isolated units, whose uniforms look slightly different, whose shouted commands are in a language you don't recognize. But these are probes, not an invasion. They fight fiercely and then vanish. They are ghosts, phantoms. They are not an army. You do not know it, but hundreds of miles away in his command compound in Beijing, Mao Zedong is making the most agonizing decision of his life. The pleas from Kim Il-sung are desperate. Stalin is applying immense pressure from Moscow, demanding that China honor its revolutionary duty and intervene. Mao's heart, the heart of a revolutionary, tells him to fight, to teach the American imperialists a lesson they will never forget. But his generals, the men tasked with guarding the new nation's borders, show him the maps. They show him the 1,000-mile front along the Yangtze River. They show him the disposition of his best, most loyal and most battle-hardened troops, all dug in, staring south. General Chen Yi, commander of the forces arrayed opposite Shanghai, sends a blunt, near-insubordinate message. To move the 4th Field Army to Korea is to invite the Tiger to enter the house through the back door. The Tiger is the Kuomintang, backed by American air power and limitless funds. To fight a war in Korea, Mao would have to strip the Yangtze line, leaving the north vulnerable to a catastrophic counter-invasion. He cannot fight a two-front war. He has just won half a country. He cannot risk losing it for the sake of the other half of someone else's. His decision is a brutal piece of political triage. He will sacrifice Korea to save his own revolution. He authorizes a token force of volunteers to cross the Yalu, enough to bloody the Americans, enough to save face with Moscow, enough to give Kim Il-sung's shattered forces some cover. But the massive, overwhelming intervention that General MacArthur is unknowingly baiting will not happen. The Great Army massed in Manchuria is a bluff, a ghost army meant to spook the Americans, while the real muscle of the PLA remains locked in its stalemate on the Yangtze. So for you, the American Marine, the march north continues. You reach the Yalu River in late November. You stand on its frozen bank and look across at the barren hills of Manchuria. It is the most anticlimactic moment of your life. You have been wound up for a cataclysmic battle, the first great clash of the Cold War, and all you find is silence and snow. You're not home by Christmas, but the war is, for all intents and purposes, over. By the spring of 1951, the last remnants of the North Korean regime have been scattered, and the entire peninsula is under the control of the United Nations and the Republic of Korea government of Syngman Rhee. The world hails it as a stunning, decisive victory. Communism has not just been contained, it has been rolled back. This swift, relatively low-cost victory creates an unexpected political supernova, General Douglas MacArthur. In our timeline, the Korean quagmire and his insubordination led to his dismissal. Here, he is a titan, the undisputed architect of the Cold War's first great triumph. His every pronouncement is treated as gospel. His hawkish, confrontational approach to foreign policy becomes the unquestioned doctrine of the United States. He is not just a general. He is a political force of nature, a kingmaker who will loom over American politics for the next decade, ensuring a far more militaristic and interventionist posture than the one pursued by the more cautious Truman. This is the victory's hidden poison. The ethical trade-off is stark. Thousands of American, British and other UN soldiers who would have died in the meat grinder of the long Korean War are alive. Their families will not receive a dreaded telegram, but the liberated people of North Korea enter a new kind of hell. Syngman Rhee, a ruthless authoritarian in our timeline, is now unleashed upon the entire peninsula. His police forces, with the tacit approval of the UN occupation authorities, begin a systematic cleansing of the North. Anyone with a suspected tie to the Communist Party, teachers, administrators, union organisers, distant cousins of party officials, is rounded up. There are no trials. There are mass executions in quiet valleys and forgotten mine shafts. The quick, clean military victory for the UN becomes the prelude to a long, dirty and brutal campaign of political terror that will claim hundreds of thousands of Korean lives and create a unified state built on a foundation of fear and suppression. You have won the war, but you have lost the peace before it has even begun. You have traded a stalemate for a graveyard. You have lived in Shanghai for nearly 20 years. The city has seeped into your bones. You remember the frantic, desperate energy of the early 1950s, the raw fear and the wild opportunism. That city is gone, buried under 2 decades of relentless construction and unimaginable wealth. You're in the mid-1960s now, and Shanghai is no longer a gilded cage. It is a kingdom of concrete and glass, a monument to a new and ruthless god, capital. The old Kuomintang, the party of Sun Yat-sen and the Northern Expedition, is a ghost. Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek is a frail, distant figure who occasionally appears in newsreels, reviewing perfectly polished but utterly ceremonial honour guards. His government still occupies the grand old buildings of Nanjing, but this is a polite fiction everyone agrees to maintain. The real capital is here, and the real government does not meet in parliaments. It meets in the penthouse clubs and private dining rooms that crown the new skyscrapers piercing the Shanghai sky. The rulers of this new South China are not generals or politicians. They are the warlords of the Bund. You see their names everywhere emblazoned on the sides of buildings, on the funnels of the thousands of ships choking the Huangpu River, on the newspapers you read and the banks that hold your meagre savings. Men like Chairman Ting of the Four Seas conglomerate or Uncle Bao of the Trans-Pacific Shipping Line. They hold no official office. They need none. They are the state. You work as a mid-level manager in one of Ting's textile factories. It is a good job, a position of status. You have a small but clean apartment in a new concrete housing block, a company perk. You can afford a Seagull brand camera, a luxury that marks you as a member of the new middle class. To achieve this, you have learned the single most important rule of the Republic of China. Your loyalty is not to the nation, but to your boss. Your allegiance is to the company. Chairman Ting is the spiritual successor to the Green Gang bosses who ran this city before the war, but his methods are infinitely more sophisticated. He does not peddle opium, he trades in futures and derivatives. He does not run protection rackets with street thugs. He engages in hostile takeovers with teams of sharp lawyers trained in America. His private security force, a small army of disciplined men equipped with the latest American hardware, is more efficient and better paid than the official city police. When there is a labour dispute at one of his docks, it is his men who restore order, swiftly and brutally. The police only arrive later to fill out the paperwork. This is the system's unexpected evolution. The KMT, having been saved from annihilation, has not withered away. It has been hollowed out, its shell now occupied by these new corporate powers. The government is not their puppet. It is their subsidiary. You witness this firsthand. A KMT Minister of Commerce, a man with a lineage tracing back to the 1911 revolution, comes to your factory for an inspection tour. In reality, he has come to beg. The government needs to fund a new airfield, but its tax revenues are a joke. No one pays taxes they are not forced to. The minister speaks to Chairman Ting with a humiliating deference. Ting listens, smiles, and agrees to invest in the project through a complex series of loans and shell corporations. In return, his companies are granted a 50-year monopoly on all air freight services, and the customs duties are waived for any goods he wishes to import. The minister thanks him profusely. The airfield will be built. The flag of the Republic of China will fly over it, but it will belong, in every way that matters, to Chairman Ting. The Americans in their consulate on the Bund watch this with a growing sense of despair. They have what they wanted, a vibrant, capitalist South China that serves as a powerful propaganda weapon against the grim, impoverished North. They beam radio broadcasts across the Yangtze, not of political speeches, but of Shanghai pop music, commercials for refrigerators, and soap operas about wealthy, attractive families. They have contained communism, but the state they have nurtured is a monster of their own creation. It is a kleptocratic oligarchy, fundamentally unstable and utterly devoid of the democratic values they claim to champion. They file reports back to Washington praising the economic miracle, while privately warning that the entire structure is a house of cards, built on greed and held together by the fear of the alternative across the river. Here lies the ethical paradox of your life. You are, by any reasonable standard, free. You can choose your job, listen to any music you like, and travel within the South. Compared to the North, where every action is dictated by the state, this is paradise. But it is the freedom of the jungle. You are free to compete, which also means you are free to fail, to be devoured. There is no social safety net. If you lose your job with Ting's company, you lose your apartment. There is no public health care. You get sick, you pay, or you die. There is no justice, only contracts. The courts are a tool for the rich to enforce their will upon the poor. This breeds a specific kind of person, a Shanghai person, hardened, cynical, and relentlessly pragmatic. Community is a weakness. Ideology is for fools. Trust is reserved for immediate family, and even then, it is conditional. Your children do not learn the Confucian classics. They learn abacus, English, and the unwritten laws of corporate survival. They learn to smile at superiors, to bully inferiors, and to see every interaction as a transaction. One evening, you stand on the balcony of your apartment, looking out over the sprawling city. The lights are dazzling, a galaxy of neon and electricity that stretches to the horizon. It is a testament to what men can build when their ambition is unleashed. You can hear the distant thrum of the city's nightlife, the rumble of its ceaseless industry. It feels powerful, alive, indestructible. Then you look north, towards the river. There are no lights there, just a vast, menacing darkness. You know that everything you see, this entire glittering, corrupt, vibrant world, exists only because of that darkness. It is the threat of the North that justifies the excesses of the South. It is the monster over the river that allows the warlords on the Bund to rule. You are a citizen of a country defined not by what it is, but by what it is not. And you wonder, in a quiet moment of treasonous thought, how long a nation built on such a hollow foundation can possibly stand. You are standing on the deck of the Star Ferry, crossing from Kowloon to Hong Kong Island. It is a ritual you have performed 1,000 times. The chug of the diesel engine, the smell of salt and harbour grime, the sight of the green and white ferry nosing its way through the sampans and walla wallas. These are the constants of your life. For 2 decades you have served His Majesty's government in this tiny, improbable colony. You have watched it swell with refugees, watched it build its great housing estates up the sides of the mountains, watched it become a beacon of frantic, determined industry. The view, as always, is magnificent. The peak looms behind a serrated line of new office blocks on the island, a testament to British order and Chinese resilience. But today, in the humid air of the late 1960s, the magnificence feels brittle. The city, for the first time in your memory, feels quiet. Not silent, of course. Hong Kong is never silent. But the frantic, world-beating energy, the sense that this crowded rock was the absolute centre of the universe, has begun to fade. It is being siphoned away, pulled northward by a gravitational force you cannot see but can feel in every financial report that crosses your desk, in every hushed conversation at the Hong Kong Club. The force has a name: Shanghai. In the old world, the world before the ceasefire, Hong Kong's purpose was clear. It was the keyhole through which the entire Western world squinted at the vast, locked room of China. It was the only port, the only bank, the only reliable point of contact. Its position was unassailable, but the ceasefire broke the lock. It did not open the whole door, but it left a massive 300 million person southern half of the room wide open. And the gateway to that room is not your deep, orderly harbour in Hong Kong. It is the muddy, chaotic, infinitely larger maw of the Yangtze River Delta. It is Shanghai. You're a civil servant. You believe in the things that have made Hong Kong work: the rule of law, an independent judiciary, a lack of corruption, a simple and predictable tax code. You have spent your career building and defending these institutions. For years, you told yourself these were Hong Kong's ultimate advantages. Capital, you reasoned, seeks stability. Talent seeks order. But you were wrong. Capital, you have discovered, is a thrill seeker. It is drawn to the explosive, unregulated growth of Shanghai like a moth to a flame. The warlords of the Bund offer deals that are unthinkable here. They offer zero taxes, no environmental regulations, a limitless supply of non-unionized labour, and a government that can be bought for the price of a dinner. The decline is not a crash. It is a slow, polite, and deeply British erosion. You see it first in the shipping manifests. 5 years ago, 90% of all foreign goods bound for South China came through your port at Kwaichung to be transshipped. Today, that number is less than 40%. The big American and European firms are sailing directly to Shanghai, willing to pay the requisite bribes for the privilege of cutting out the middleman. Your port is still busy, but it is handling smaller loads for smaller markets: the Philippines, Thailand, the new unified Korea. You are becoming a regional hub, not a global one. Then the people start to leave. It begins as a trickle. A bright young man in your department, an Oxford-educated Cantonese who you had earmarked for promotion, resigns. He apologises profusely. He has been offered a position at Four Seas conglomerate in Shanghai, at 5 times his government salary. You cannot compete. You wish him well, but you both know he is leaving a safe, predictable ship for a glamorous, dangerous pirate vessel. A year later, you hear he has made a fortune. A year after that, you hear he was purged in a corporate restructuring and has not been seen since. This is the city's unexpected twist. Hong Kong's eclipse is not marked by riots or collapse, but by a quiet exodus of ambition. The expatriate community shrinks. The American club has vacancies for the first time in its history. At dinner parties, the talk is no longer about the latest property development in the mid-levels, but about who is moving to Shanghai, who has a connection with Chairman Ting's organisation, how to navigate the city's treacherous but profitable currents. Hong Kong is becoming a place people move from, or a place for those who lack the nerve for the real game up the coast. Culturally, you are being provincialised. 10 years ago, the Mandarin language films of your Shaw Brothers studio dominated Asian cinema. Now, they are being eclipsed by the slick, lavish, American-influenced productions coming out of Shanghai, financed by the corporate warlords. The music of your city, the vibrant Cantonese pop, is now a niche interest. The lingua franca of Asian pop culture is the Mandarin dialect of Shanghai, backed by marketing budgets that dwarf anything you could imagine. Hong Kong is becoming quaint. The ethical tension this creates for you and your administration is excruciating. You offer a better, more just society. Your independent commission against corruption, founded here a few years earlier in a desperate attempt to shore up your key advantage, is ruthlessly efficient. Your courts are, by and large, fair. Your police are professional. You provide public housing and healthcare that, while basic, are a world away from the squalor of Shanghai's slums. But nobody seems to care. The world does not reward justice. It rewards growth. The people who do care are the refugees. But they are a new kind of refugee. They do not pour across the border from the north, escaping communism. They trickle in by boat from the south, escaping capitalism. They are the ones who have been broken by the Shanghai system. The shopkeeper whose business was crushed by a conglomerate. The family whose daughter caught the eye of the wrong corporate enforcer. The intellectual who wrote a book that offended Uncle Bao. They come to Hong Kong seeking not wealth, but asylum. They seek the quiet protection of your British laws. You grant them entry, and in doing so, your city finds a new, more melancholic purpose. You're no longer the gateway to fortunes. You're the sanctuary for the casualties of the gold rush. You step off the ferry at Central. The evening crowds are thinning out. The city's lights flicker on, climbing the peak. It is still one of the most beautiful sights in the world, but it feels like the twilight of an empire, a perfectly preserved artifact of a bygone era. You have built a city on the rule of law and common decency, a small island of order in a sea of chaos. It is a noble achievement, a moral triumph, but it is an economic catastrophe. And as you walk towards the cool, dark stone of the Legislative Council building, you're struck by a truly terrible thought. Perhaps, in the grand, brutal sweep of history, justice is a luxury good that no one is willing to pay for. You're in Harbin, the capital of Heilongjiang province, and it is 1956. The city is a ghost of a different empire, its onion-domed churches and grand Art Nouveau facades, a testament to a time when Russians, not Japanese or Chinese, were the masters of Manchuria. You are a junior translator at the Harbin Institute of Technology, a place that has become the beating heart of the Sino-Soviet alliance. Your days are spent rendering complex engineering schematics, from Russian into Mandarin. You work alongside Soviet advisors, big, ruddy men who smell of black tobacco and complain about the local beer, but are genuinely passionate about building socialism. The alliance feels solid, eternal. It is the great northern axis against which the American-backed South shatters itself. The Soviet Union is your big brother. They send you technology, weapons, and entire factories, disassembled in the Urals and rebuilt here on the Manchurian plain. They are your shield, your mentor, and your only friend in a hostile world. Then you hear the speech. It is not broadcast on public radio. It is a document, thick with a special red seal, read aloud in a locked room to you and a handful of other trusted party cadres. It is a transcript of Nikita Khrushchev's secret speech to the 20th Party Congress in Moscow. As a senior cadre reads the translation, a chill descends on the room that has nothing to do with the Manchurian winter. Khrushchev has denounced Stalin. He has spoken of a cult of personality, of purges, of catastrophic mistakes. You and your comrades exchange uneasy glances. To you, Stalin is not a man. He is an icon, a symbol of revolutionary will, second only to Chairman Mao. But the true poison is not in the critique of the past. It is in the prescription for the future. The Soviet reader gets to the key phrases: peaceful coexistence, different roads to socialism, avoiding the inevitability of war. In Moscow, these are words of pragmatism, a step back from the brink of nuclear annihilation. In your locked room in Harbin, they are words of betrayal, a heresy. How can there be peaceful coexistence with the American imperialists who arm the Kuomintang puppets in Shanghai? How can there be different roads when the only road is armed struggle to liberate the southern half of your own country? This is not a new policy. This is surrender. It is a confirmation of the deep, lingering suspicion you have held since 1949, that Stalin, and now his successor, never truly wanted a unified, powerful China. They wanted a controllable client state, and the ceasefire on the Yangtze was the first and greatest act of this betrayal. The Soviet advisors in Harbin do not understand the shift. They become more relaxed. They tell jokes about Stalin that would have gotten them shot a year ago. They seem relieved. You and your Chinese colleagues retreat into a cold, formal politeness. The shared project of socialist construction is over. You're now just colleagues, guarding your words, your thoughts, your loyalties. The final break comes a year later. Khrushchev, in a desperate attempt to patch the relationship, visits Beijing. You are not there, but you're tasked with translating the internal memos that document the meetings. The language is brutal. Mao, in his direct peasant manner, accuses Khrushchev of being a rich farmer who has forgotten the taste of revolution. He calls him a revisionist who is putting on a bourgeois suit and bowing to the Americans. Khrushchev, for his part, is dismissive. He mocks the Great Liberation preparation as primitive and unscientific. He sees a China obsessed with a civil war that the rest of the world has moved on from. He tells Mao to be practical, to accept the reality of the two Chinas, and to focus on feeding his people. To Mao, this is the ultimate insult. It is a demand that he abandon the very reason his state exists, the sacred mission to unify the motherland. The meeting ends not in disagreement, but in disgust. The schism does not play out in the newspapers. It explodes on the frozen frontier. This is the unexpected, violent turn. The PRC, utterly isolated and encircled by American power in the south and on the Korean peninsula, needs to make a statement. It needs to prove, to itself and to the world, that it is not afraid, that its revolutionary will is pure and unyielding. It lashes out not at its main enemy, the Americans, but at the one who has committed the ultimate sin, the betrayal by a brother. You are transferred from your translation desk to a political commissar's unit on the Ussuri River, the border with the Soviet Far East. It is a tense, forgotten front. In the winter of 1958, years before the clashes of our timeline, your unit receives its orders. You are to punish the revisionist provocations. It is a manufactured incident. A PLA patrol crosses to a disputed island, Zhenbaodao. The Soviets send a border guard unit to intercept them. But your forces are not a patrol. They are an ambush. They are the best troops of the Shenyang military region, armed with anti-tank weapons and heavy mortars. The fight is short and savage. You see the aftermath. The snow is black with cordite and red with blood. The smoking wrecks of 2 Soviet armoured personnel carriers sit on the ice. The bodies of Soviet border guards, boys from Siberia and the Caucasus, lie frozen in the snow. Your side has taken casualties too, but you have won. You have bloodied the nose of the big brother. The effect is immediate and catastrophic. Every Soviet advisor in China is recalled within a week. The flow of aid, of technology, of fuel stops as if a tap has been turned off. The half-finished factories in Manchuria fall silent. The advanced jet fighters you were promised are never delivered. China is alone. This is the profound ethical dilemma. Chairman Mao has achieved his aim: absolute independence. The Chinese Revolution now belongs only to the Chinese, but you, standing on the frozen riverbank, see the cost. In the name of ideological purity, your government has deliberately picked a fight with its only powerful ally, plunging 600 million people into an even deeper isolation and poverty. You have traded Soviet patronage for a state of perpetual, unwinnable war on all fronts. You are surrounded by the American imperialists to the south and east, and now the Soviet social imperialists to the north and west. The world is no longer a simple bipolar struggle between communism and capitalism. It is now a 3-body problem, with 3 nuclear-armed powers, the US, the USSR, and soon a desperately striving China, all viewing each other with a mixture of fear and contempt. This premature schism creates a far more dangerous and unstable world. You have not just divorced your big brother, you have declared war on the entire world, confident in the singular, absolute, and terrifying purity of your own revolution. You are 16 years old, and you are on fire. It is not the fire of a furnace or a fever, but a blaze of pure, righteous certainty that scours your soul clean of doubt. The year is 1966. You are a Red Guard. Your world, the northern world, has been sealed in a crucible for nearly 2 decades. You have been taught that you are the last pure revolutionary on Earth. The Americans are imperialists. The Soviets are revisionist traitors. The South is a cancerous whorehouse run by puppets. You are the vanguard of humanity's future. And then, one night, you hear the poison. You are huddled with 2 friends in a damp cellar, a forbidden space. One of them, a boy whose father is a senior radio technician for the party, has built a crystal radio set. It is an act of supreme treason. He fiddles with a copper wire, and through a crackle of static a sound leaks into the silence. It is a woman's voice. It is not the strident, heroic voice of the revolutionary opera singers you hear on the state radio. This voice is soft, sweet, and laden with a decadent melancholy. She is singing a love song. The melody is simple, almost sticky, and it slides into your ear like honeyed venom. It speaks of moonlight, separation, and personal longing. These are emotions you have been taught to despise. Longing for an individual is a bourgeois sentiment. You must long only for the liberation of your southern comrades. Sadness is a counter-revolutionary weakness. You must be filled with revolutionary optimism. And love, romantic love, is a distraction from your duty to the party. Yet, as you listen, you feel a strange, disquieting stirring. The song is followed by an advertisement for White Cat brand soap, promising a fragrance that will make you unforgettable. Then comes the opening of a radio play, the sound of laughter, clinking glasses, and a fast-talking man trying to close a business deal. This is the sound of Shanghai. This is the fever that drifts across the river every night on the AM band. It is a constant whispering temptation, a broadcast from a phantom world of comfort, pleasure, and individuality. It is more dangerous than an army. An army can be fought, but how do you fight a melody? How do you shoot a soap commercial? The party, in a moment of dark genius, decides not to fight it, but to use it. The great proletarian cultural revolution begins, as it did in our timeline, as a purge initiated by Chairman Mao against his rivals. But here, it does not spiral into chaotic factionalism. The constant, insidious presence of the South gives it a single, unifying and terrifying focus. The enemy is no longer an abstract capitalist roader within the party. The enemy is the South, and anyone who is susceptible to its poison. The Cultural Revolution becomes a vast hysterical exorcism. You and your comrades are the exorcists. You storm through the streets of Wuhan, a city perched on the very edge of the front line. The Southern broadcasts become your primary tool. At struggle sessions, it is no longer enough to accuse a professor of bourgeois academic thinking. You drag him onto a stage, place a loudspeaker next to his head, and blast a Shanghai pop song. Do you hear this, you old reactionary? And you scream, "This is the sound of your black heart. This is the filth you wish to poison our country with." His crime is no longer ideological. It is cultural. It is sensory. This is the unexpected twist. The Southern radio transforms the Cultural Revolution from a primarily political purge into a war on culture itself. Anything that could be considered a bridge to the old world, a world now preserved in the decadent South, must be destroyed. You and your Red Guard units smash ancient Ming Dynasty vases, not just because they are old, but because you have heard on the radio that the KMT culture minister in Nanjing has opened a museum to display such things. Therefore they are tainted. You burn classical texts of poetry, because the love poems within echo the sentiments of the Southern love songs. The shared cultural heritage of China is now the most dangerous fifth column of all. To be pure, the North must not just be revolutionary, it must be alien to its own past, and thus alien to its southern twin. Your fever takes you to the riverbank. On a high bluff overlooking the Yangtze, there stands an ancient Buddhist temple, the Temple of the Silent Crane. It has stood for 1,000 years. It is a place of serene beauty. You see it as a fortress of reaction. You lead the charge. You and your comrades, boys and girls your age, swarm into the temple grounds. You smash the serene, smiling statues of the bodhisattvas, their plaster faces crumbling to dust under your iron bars. Their compassion is a weakness you cannot afford. You tear down the intricate wooden screens and pile them in the courtyard for a bonfire. Their beauty is a southern seduction. Inside you find an old monk, perhaps 90 years old, sitting in silent meditation. He does not move. He does not speak. He simply looks at you with a profound, unshakable pity. His passivity is the ultimate provocation. It is a silent rebuke to your revolutionary fire. You scream at him. You accuse him of being a southern agent, of praying for the return of the landlords and capitalists. He remains silent. In a fit of rage, another Red Guard strikes him with the butt of a rifle. He falls, a fragile pile of bones in a saffron robe. In that moment, you experience the profound ethical tension of your world. You have done your duty. You have destroyed a nest of feudal superstition. You have helped to purify the nation, to prepare it for the final struggle. You should feel triumphant. But as you look at the broken old man and the ruins of a millennium of art and faith, a sliver of ice enters your heart. You have destroyed something that cannot be replaced. You have silenced a piece that your world of slogans and struggle sessions can never replicate. You have mistaken silence for opposition and beauty for betrayal. To prove your immunity to the southern fever, you have burned down your own house. You turn away from the monk and back to the bonfire. You raise your little red book and begin to chant, your voice joining the chorus, louder now, more desperate, trying to drown out the silence you have created. That night, from across the river, the faint sound of a saxophone plays a lonely, lingering tune. It is the sound of a world you're destroying yourself to resist. The fever is not coming from the south. It has been inside you all along. You step off the hydrofoil from Taipei in the spring of 1972. You've been away for 6 years, earning your degree in electrical engineering at National Taiwan University. a place of quiet, disciplined order. The city you return to, Shanghai, is a different beast entirely. The frantic, desperate energy of the 1960s has been replaced by something harder, faster, and infinitely more ambitious. The first wave of the South's economic miracle, the one built on cheap textiles and plastic toys, is over. Its fumes still choke the air in the industrial districts, a gritty haze you can taste on the back of your tongue. But the warlords of the Bund, the true masters of this city-state, can read a balance sheet. They see the rising competition from unified Korea, from Thailand, from the Philippines. They know that a future built on cheap labour is a race to the bottom. They need a new game. You are part of that new game. You're not returning to a job in your uncle's clattering, filthy textile mill. You have been recruited by a new entity, a joint venture that exists only on paper and in the minds of a few visionaries. It is called the Yangtze Delta Integrated Systems Corporation, a bland name for a revolutionary idea. Your new boss is a Formosan, Dr. Xiao, a quiet, brilliant man who did his postdoctoral work at Texas Instruments, alongside a man named Jack Kilby. He speaks of photolithography and PN junctions, with the reverence a priest reserves for Holy Scripture. The money, however, comes from Chairman Ting of the Four Seas conglomerate. He understands nothing of the science, but he understands risk and monopoly. You're driven out of the city centre, past the last of the sprawling shanty towns, into the marshy, reclaimed farmland between Shanghai and Suzhou. Here, rising from the mud, is the future. It is a series of long, low, windowless white buildings. There are no smokestacks. The only sound is the hum of massive air conditioning units. This is the nucleus of the Silicon Delta, the decision to bypass heavy industry, to ignore steel, ships, and automobiles, was not a brilliant strategic choice. It was an act of desperation, an elegant solution born of the South's unique dysfunction. To build a world-class steel mill or a car factory requires immense state planning, vast physical infrastructure, and long-term political stability. The Republic of China has none of these things. Its government is a corrupt shell. Its leaders are corporate predators, not nation builders. They think in fiscal quarters, not 5-year plans. They cannot build a national railway, but they can fund a high-risk venture that promises obscene profits in 36 months. Semiconductors are the perfect gamble. They require more intellectual capital than physical capital, more precision than brute force. They are the weapons of choice for a state that has no real state. This is where your Formosan and Japanese partners become essential. Japan, constrained by its post-war pacifist constitution and its formal recognition of the PRC in the north, cannot deal directly with the rebel government in Shanghai. But its corporations, Sony, Hitachi, NEC, are desperate to tap the southern market and its engineering talent. Formosa is the bridge. Dr. Xiao and his team of Formosan engineers bring the technical knowledge, learned in the corporate labs of America and Japan. They bring the management discipline, a legacy of 50 years of Japanese administration. They act as the buffer, the translators, the trusted intermediaries who can navigate both the rigid hierarchy of a Japanese boardroom and the chaotic, relationship-based world of a Shanghai warlord. You enter your new workplace. The contrast with the world outside is absolute. You must spend 10 minutes in an airlock being blasted with sterilized air. You don a bunny suit, a claustrophobic white uniform that covers you from head to toe, leaving only your eyes visible. The air inside the fabrication plant, the fab, is 1,000 times cleaner than the air in an operating theatre. It is a sacred space, a temple to precision. Here, you and 100 other young engineers, all trained in Formosa, Japan or America, are the new high priests. The great unexpected twist of the Silicon Delta is not that it exists, but how it operates. You're not designing new chips. You're not trying to compete with Intel or Texas Instruments on innovation. That would be too slow, too expensive. Dr. Xiao has pioneered a different model, one born from the South's lack of a coherent national industrial policy. We will be a foundry, he tells you in your first orientation meeting. We will not have our own products. We will be the kitchen. Others will bring us their recipes and we will cook for them. We will make chips for anyone who will pay, faster, cheaper, and better than they can make them themselves. This is the birth of the pure play foundry model. An American company designs a new chip for a calculator. Instead of building a $1 billion fab in California, they send the designs to you. A Japanese company wants to produce a chip for a new electronic watch. They outsource the production to your facility in the Yangtze Delta. You become the indispensable workshop for the global electronics revolution. Your allegiance is not to a nation or a flag, but to the client. You guard their intellectual property with your life, because your reputation for neutrality is your only real asset. The ethical tension of this new world is sharper than a shard of silicon. The wealth you are creating is immense, but it is extraordinarily concentrated. The Silicon Delta creates a new caste. You, the engineer in the bunny suit, are at the top. You earn a salary that is 50 times that of a textile worker. You live in a private, guarded residential compound with its own school, its own hospital, its own imported goods at the supermarket. You live in a bubble of clean air and prosperity. Just outside the walls of your compound, the old world is dying. The textile factories and the plastic works are closing, unable to compete. Millions of workers, the people who built the first miracle, are being cast aside. They are obsolete. Their skills are worthless in your new economy. They are swelling the slums, living on the margins, their resentment a simmering pot that the corporate warlords keep in check with private armies and bread and circuses, cheap entertainment broadcast from the city's new television towers. You are building a technological paradise for the few, directly on top of the ruins of the lives of the many. You tell yourself it is the price of progress. You tell yourself that this is the only way to stay ahead, to keep the darkness from the north at bay. But sometimes, late at night, when you look out from your air-conditioned apartment at the sprawling, powerless darkness of the slums below, you feel a tremor of fear. You're not building a nation. You're building a beautiful, fragile, and exquisitely profitable fortress, and you have locked the vast majority of your own people outside its gates. You are lost. It is a feeling so pervasive in the Shanghai of the 1970s that it has become the city's background radiation, a low hum of spiritual static. You work, you eat, you sleep, but the old anchors are gone. The family is a shattered concept, the village a distant memory. The nation is a fiction represented by a flag on a building owned by a corporation. The only god is the Hong Kong dollar, and you do not have enough of it to be a true believer. You are one of the millions left behind by the Silicon Delta miracle, a former factory worker whose job now belongs to a machine in a clean room you will never be allowed to enter. You are spiritually adrift in a sea of concrete, and you are drowning. Then you hear the call. It comes from posters pasted on construction sites and from pamphlets handed out on street corners. It promises an answer, a meaning, a hope that is not tied to a stock price. It is the Billy Graham crusade, live at the Jiangwan Stadium, a relic of the old KMT's glory days, now repurposed for a new kind of salvation. You go, not out of faith, but out of a desperate gnawing curiosity. You find yourself in a crowd of 100,000 souls, a vast mosaic of the South's dispossessed. You see laid-off dock workers, anxious shopkeepers, frightened mothers, and disillusioned students. The humid press of their bodies is the first community you have felt in years. Then he appears on the distant stage, a tall, handsome American with a voice that seems to have been forged in the furnaces of the Old Testament. This is Billy Graham, a man who moves with the absolute certainty of someone who has read the last page of the book and knows how the story ends. His message is devastatingly simple. You are a sinner, your world is broken, your pursuit of wealth and pleasure has left you empty. But there is a power, a love, a grace that can save you. It can wash you clean. All you must do is accept. And he frames this spiritual choice in a language you understand perfectly. He speaks of this godless tyranny in the north, of the atheistic materialism that has enslaved your brothers and sisters across the river. He presents a choice not just between sin and salvation, but between the darkness of Mao's China and the light of a Christian America. To accept Jesus is to choose freedom. It is a spiritual act of anti-communism. As you listen, you feel a lifetime of cynicism and despair begin to crack. When he makes the altar call, you do not walk. You are carried forward by a human tide of weeping, broken people. For the first time, you feel like you are a part of something, not just a cog in a machine. This is the spark. But a fire needs local fuel to burn, and it finds it in a man named Pastor Wu. Wu is a former KMT chaplain, a man who combines a soldier's discipline with a showman's flair and a deep intuitive understanding of the Chinese soul. He becomes the movement's local apostle, and he performs a miracle of religious synthesis. He does not just preach the American gospel, he synicizes it. He takes the raw power of evangelical Christianity and fuses it with the deep structures of Chinese folk religion. Ancestor worship, that, he preaches, is simply honouring the great cloud of witnesses who came before, the Jade Emperor and the pantheon of local gods. They are the demonic principalities that must be cast out to purify the land for Christ. Feng Shui, a pagan superstition to be replaced by the blessing of the Holy Spirit upon your home. He creates a faith that feels both revolutionary and deeply, traditionally Chinese. This is the movement's unexpected twist, its second miracle. It finds a patron saint in the most cynical man in Shanghai, Chairman Ting of the Four Seas conglomerate. Ting does not find God. He finds a tool. He sees the riots at the shuttered textile mills. He sees the despair turning to rage in the slums. And he sees Pastor Wu's movement. He sees a force that preaches sobriety, hard work, sexual morality, and, most beautifully of all, obedience to earthly authority as a divine mandate. It is the perfect ideology for a docile, productive, non-unionized workforce. Ting's money transforms the movement. Small house churches become mega-churches, vast air-conditioned auditoriums that can hold 10,000 worshippers. He funds a network of Good Samaritan hospitals and Light of the World schools. The Cross of Christ begins to appear on the skyline, a glowing blue neon symbol atop the new cathedral, a building taller than Ting's own corporate headquarters. The Republic of China, a state born of secular nationalism, finds itself in the grip of a great awakening, underwritten by the very corporate warlords who have profited from its soullessness. The ethical tension is the price of this salvation. You're a true believer now. The church has given you everything. Your children attend a Good Samaritan school, receiving an education you could never have afforded. When your wife falls ill, the church hospital cares for her. You have a community, a purpose. You belong. You're no longer lost, but you're also required to serve. You join the church's new youth auxiliary, the Soldiers of the Lamb. At first, your duties are simple. You are an usher at Sunday services. You help distribute food to the poor. But the mission expands. Pastor Wu preaches of a nation that must be cleansed. The Soldiers of the Lamb become a moral police force. You're sent to persuade a local cinema to stop showing a decadent film from Hong Kong. You stand outside nightclubs shaming the patrons. Then, one day, you are sent to a factory where workers are trying to form a union to demand better pay. Your unit leader, a terrifyingly zealous young man, tells you that unions are a form of northern collectivism, an atheist plot to sow discord. Your job is to break the strike. You find yourself standing opposite men who are just like you were 5 years ago, desperate, angry and lost, and you, in the name of God, are there to crush their hope. You do your duty. The strike is broken. You return to the church for a prayer meeting. You sing the hymns, your voice joining the chorus of thousands, celebrating the victory of righteousness. The church has saved your soul, but it has demanded your conscience as payment. It has given you a family, but it has turned you into a weapon against your own people. It has filled the spiritual void of the South, but it has filled it with a militant, intolerant, and terrifying certainty. You look up at the giant neon cross glowing in the Shanghai night, and for the first time you wonder if its light is meant to illuminate or to blind. You are Senior Captain Bao of the People's Army of Vietnam. Your bones know the cold. Not the damp malarial chill of the southern jungles you dream of, but the sharp granite-hard cold of the mountains along the Chinese frontier. It is 1968. You should be in the South. You should be leading your company of hardened veterans through the rubber plantations and rice paddies around Saigon, preparing for the great offensive that will shatter the Americans and their puppets. That is the war you have trained for, the one you have sacrificed your youth for. Instead, you are here, in a command bunker dug into a hillside overlooking Lao Cai, staring at a map that shows the wrong enemy. Your entire world, the world of a professional soldier, is a study in defence. Your best divisions, the battle-hardened 308 and 312, are not deployed along the demilitarized zone. They are here, dug into a complex network of tunnels and fortifications that stretches for 500 miles from the coast to the Laotian border. They are not facing south, they are facing north. They are facing the Republic of China. The American war machine is a known quantity. You have studied their B-52 strike patterns, the tactics of their helicopter cavalry, the predictable psychology of their young conscripted soldiers. You know how to fight them. But the enemy to your north is a different kind of phantom. They are your own people, yet they are not. They are Chinese soldiers of the Kuomintang's Yunnan Corps, armed with the latest American rifles trained by American Special Forces advisors and supplied from the endless industrial engine of the Yangtze Delta. They do not launch massive invasions, they bleed you. Every night, the radio intercepts crackle with their chatter, a mixture of Yunnanese dialect and American military slang. Every week, one of their long-range reconnaissance patrols, likely led by a green-eyed American, slips across the border to ambush a supply convoy or assassinate a local party official. Your best men are not fighting for national liberation. They are chasing ghosts in these northern mountains, dying in pointless attritional skirmishes that never make the communiques from Hanoi. You're a tiger who's been chained to a post, forced to fight off a swarm of angry hornets while the real prey grazes peacefully just out of reach. This is the great suffocating reality of your war. The Ho Chi Minh Trail, in the way the Americans imagine it, does not exist. The primary artery of supply for your revolution was always meant to be China, but the border with the People's Republic of China, your ideological brother, is hundreds of miles away, beyond the hostile territory of the South Chinese. The supplies that do come from Mao's China must travel a long, treacherous roundabout route through the jungles of Burma and Laos, a trickle where you need a flood. Your main benefactor is the Soviet Union, but their aid must come by sea, running the gauntlet of the American 7th Fleet. For every 100 artillery shells that are shipped from Odessa, you are lucky if 10 reach a battery in the south. You are being strangled, and the man who is tightening the noose is not in Washington or Saigon. He is in Shanghai. This strategic paralysis leads to the war's most unexpected reversal. The great turning point you've been waiting for, the one that will break the stalemate, never arrives. In your world, there is no Tet offensive. The plan was on General Giap's desk. You saw the preliminary drafts yourself, a coordinated countrywide uprising, a series of lightning strikes on every major city and military base in the south, timed to the Lunar New Year. It was audacious, brilliant, a masterstroke worthy of the victor of Dien Bien Phu. It was meant to be the war's great thunderclap, but it required a massive surge of men and material. It required reserves that you simply do not have. To launch the Tet offensive would mean stripping the northern border, leaving Hanoi itself vulnerable to a lightning thrust from the Yunnan Corps. The order to stand down came in a coded message last month. The official reason was unfavourable strategic conditions. You and your fellow officers knew the truth. General Giap cannot fight a two-front war. He has been checkmated not by the Americans, but by the ghost of a Chinese civil war that ended 20 years ago. The ethical tension of this reality grinds you down daily. You are a patriot. You believe in Uncle Ho, in the reunification of your motherland. But you are also a soldier who can count his rifles and his bags of rice. The propaganda posters in Hanoi show heroic soldiers charging south to victory. But your reality is a daily report of another 3 men lost to a landmine on a forgotten mountain trail. The government in Hanoi demands infinite sacrifice for a victory that your strategic position makes impossible. You are sending boys to their deaths in a war that you know, in the cold, logical part of your soldier's brain, you cannot win. Not like this. One afternoon, General Giap himself visits your command post. He is smaller than you imagined, his eyes weary with the impossible weight of his command. He does not speak of glorious victory. He speaks of endurance, of revolutionary patience. He looks at your maps, at the red symbols marking the KMT divisions across the border. The tree that bends survives the typhoon, Captain, he says, his voice barely a whisper. We will be the tree. We will bend. We will wait. You understand. He is not planning to win. He is planning not to lose. He is settling in for a war that will last 50 years, 100 years, a war that will bleed Vietnam white, generation after generation, until the geopolitical situation in China changes. This is not a strategy for victory. It is a sentence of multi-generational suffering. After he leaves, you stand outside the bunker, looking north into the hazy mountains of China. You feel a profound and bitter irony. American politicians speak of the domino theory, of their fear that if Vietnam falls, all of Asia will fall to a monolithic communism directed from Beijing. They are fighting the wrong war against the wrong enemy for the wrong reasons. There is no monolithic communism. There are 2 Chinas locked in a death grip, and your country, your people, your revolution are nothing more than a footnote in their endless fratricidal war. You're a domino, yes, but you're trapped between two other, much larger dominoes, and you're being crushed by their weight. The lie is in the numbers. As a deputy director in the Annan Provincial Planning Commission, you have spent your entire adult life in service to the numbers. They are the sacred texts of your world. Production quotas, grain yields, tonnage of steel produced. For 30 years, these figures have been the building blocks of your reality, the proof of your progress towards the inevitable liberation of the South. In your office in Zhengzhou in the early 1980s, you stare at the ledger for the summer wheat harvest, and you know the lie has finally grown too big to hide. The numbers on the page say your province has met its quota. They are elegant, precise, and utterly fictional. You fabricated them yourself, just as your own superior will fabricate his report to Beijing, and his superior will fabricate the national report. The truth is not in the ledger. The truth is in the silence of the state-run tractor factory on the edge of the city, its assembly lines frozen with rust. The truth is in the hollow eyes of the peasants who come to the city to beg, a crime for which they are no longer even arrested. The truth is in the colour of the dust that coats everything, a pale, lifeless grey that seems to rise not from the earth, but from the bones of a dying system. Mao Zedong is dead. He has been dead for several years. The Gang of Four, his most radical disciples, tried to hold the line. They launched one last hysterical campaign, the final struggle to crush the southern puppets. But you cannot fuel a revolution with slogans. The country was too tired, too hungry, too broken to respond. The campaign collapsed not in a bang, but in a collective, exhausted sigh. The radicals were quietly arrested, their failure so absolute that it required no public denunciation. Into this vacuum steps a small, quiet man with an iron will, Deng Xiaoping. In our timeline, he was the architect of a pragmatic, state-led opening to the world. Here he's not an architect. He is a receiver in bankruptcy. He has not inherited a country. He has inherited a corpse. His famous pragmatism is no longer a matter of policy choice. It is a matter of biological necessity. The reports that cross his desk, the real ones whispered in secret, speak of a famine looming in the heartland that will make the Great Leap Forward look like a summer of plenty. The north is a threadbare coat in a blizzard, and the seams are giving way. In a series of secret meetings in the Zhongnanhai compound, Deng and the handful of old revolutionaries who survived the purges face a truth more horrifying than any American missile. The early violent break with the Soviet Union has left them with no allies. Their own relentless purges have destroyed their best minds. Their single-minded focus on military confrontation has starved every other sector of the state. They have no money. They have no technology. They have no food. There is only one place to turn. It is a conclusion so monstrous, so ideologically radioactive, that the men who first utter it are nearly branded as traitors. The only entity with the logistical capacity, the surplus food, and the geographic proximity to avert the starvation of 60 million people in the Yellow River Basin is the Republic of China. They must go to the warlords of the Bund, to the running dog capitalists of Shanghai, and they must beg. The news of the Northern Initiative comes to you not as a public announcement, but as a coded directive. Your province is to be a primary recipient of cross-river humanitarian assistance. You are to prepare to host a delegation from the Shanghai Chamber of Commerce. You feel a wave of nausea, a vertigo of the soul. Your entire life, your entire identity has been built on the absolute necessity of destroying these people. Now they are your saviours. The delegation arrives not by train, but by helicopter, a machine you have only ever seen in grainy propaganda films about the war in Vietnam. They land in the provincial capital's main square, scattering dust and torn revolutionary posters. They step out, and you witness the arrival of a new species. They are men your age, but they seem to have been forged in a different star. They wear tailored Italian suits. They carry slim leather briefcases. They speak a fast, clipped Mandarin, laced with English acronyms and a casual, soul-crushing condescension. They are led by a man named Victor Ting, the youngest son of the great chairman Ting, a man who radiates an aura of serene, absolute power. This is the devastating, unexpected twist. This is not charity. It is an acquisition. Victor Ting and his team are not aid workers. They are venture capitalists. In the first meeting, in the same drab room where you have spent years planning the allocation of non-existent resources, Victor Ting does not speak of socialist brotherhood or shared Chinese ancestry. He He opens a device that feels like a piece of alien technology. It is titled Project Heartland, a strategic investment in northern logistical assets. He informs your stunned and silent party committee that the Four Seas conglomerate will provide 5 million tons of rice and wheat. In return, Four Seas will be granted a 99-year lease on the port facilities at Wuhan on the Yangtze, exclusive rights to rebuild and operate the Beijing-Wuhan Railway, and a controlling interest in the Zhengzhou tractor factory, which he plans to convert into a plant for assembling consumer electronics. This is not aid. It is a leveraged buyout of a failed state. The ethical dilemma is absolute and immediate. You are assigned as a liaison to Victor Ting's team. Your job is to facilitate their takeover of your province. Every day, you are confronted with this stark choice between your ideology and your humanity. You watch a Four Seas logistics expert, a woman half your age with an MBA from Stanford, ruthlessly fire 2,000 unnecessary workers from the State Grain Distribution Center. It is brutal. It is heartless. And within a week the grain is moving 3 times as fast, reaching villages that have not seen a full ration in a year. You watch them tear down the revolutionary slogans on the factory walls and replace them with posters that say time is money and efficiency is the only truth. It is a desecration of everything you believe. But then you see the first shipment of rice being distributed in the street outside your office, and you watch a mother weep as she's handed a sack with the blue and gold logo of the Four Seas conglomerate. You are saving your people by selling their soul. You are a patriot who has been forced to become a collaborator in the most humiliating conquest imaginable. A conquest not of arms, but of commerce. The Northern Thaw is not a political spring. It is the cold, clinical, and efficient process of a corpse being thawed, dismembered, and sold for parts. One evening you stand with Victor Ting on a hill overlooking the silent tractor factory. "Don't feel so bad, Director," he says, lighting a thin American cigarette. "You are good at revolution. We are good at business. Everyone has their talent." He does not say it with malice. He says it with the simple, unarguable pity of a predator for its prey. You're a student at Peking University in 1988, and the air in your dormitory room crackles with the forbidden energy of debate. But you're not arguing about democracy. You're not whispering the names of Jefferson or Rousseau. The dog-eared, secretly translated books being passed from hand to hand are not. The Federalist Papers. They are Oswald Spengler's The Decline of the West and newly rediscovered works of Confucian realpolitik. You're not debating how to become more like the West. You're arguing with a desperate, soul-searching intensity about how to avoid becoming the South. Beijing is a city suffering from a profound case of cognitive dissonance. The physical landscape is changing at a bewildering speed. The first garish neon signs advertising southern brands of beer and cigarettes have appeared on the old grey buildings of Wangfujing Street. They look like open sores on the city's stoic face. The sleek black sedans of the Four Seas conglomerate glide through streets still clogged with bicycles and sputtering coal-fired buses. The language of the city is changing too. The arrogant, fast-clipped accent of Shanghai is now the sound of authority, the voice of the new bosses who run the joint venture factories and management consultancies that are modernizing the North. The opening has worked, in a purely mechanical sense. The famine was averted, the factories are slowly restarting. There are goods in the stores, even if you can't afford them. But this is not the hopeful, optimistic opening that the world imagines. It is a daily grinding humiliation. You see it everywhere. You see your professors, men of immense learning who have endured decades of political turmoil, being treated like backward children by southern executives young enough to be their grandchildren. You see the best graduates of your university, the future of the North, lining up to take jobs as glorified clerks for southern corporations, their engineering and physics degrees valued less than their willingness to adopt a southern-style English name like Kevin or Lisa. Out of this swamp of resentment, a new ideology is being born. It is a spiritual immune response to a foreign body, but the foreign body is not Western. It is the other half of itself. It is not born in the halls of government, which are too busy managing the terms of their surrender. It is born here, in the dormitories and cheap tea houses around the university district. It is a new, deeply resentful nationalism. This is its unexpected, venomous twist. The great enemy is not the distant American imperialist. It is the southern Chinese collaborator. The new nationalism does not look to the future for a model. It looks to a mythologized past. It rejects both the failed, hollow promises of Maoist internationalism and the soulless materialism of Southern capitalism. It seeks a third path, a path rooted in the imagined virtues of the North: endurance, purity, collective sacrifice, and a profound contempt for the merchant class. The movement's Bible is a book that has appeared as if from nowhere, an anonymous samizdat text called The Northern Soul. It argues that the Yangtze River is not just a geographical line, but a civilizational one. The South, with its history of trade, piracy, and contact with foreigners, has always been corrupt, mercenary, and weak. The North, the heartland of the Yellow River, the seat of true dynasties, is the repository of the authentic Chinese spirit. It argues that the North's poverty is not a sign of failure, but a mark of its spiritual purity. It has not sold its soul for Southern trinkets and American technology. The government of Deng Xiaoping, pragmatic and desperate, does not crush this movement. It recognizes its utility. The party's old legitimacy, based on revolution, is dead. This new nationalism offers a replacement. It provides a perfect scapegoat for the population's misery. Why are you poor? Not because of 30 years of disastrous party policy, but because of the predatory Southern capitalists. Who is responsible for your humiliation? Not the leaders who begged for aid, but the arrogant Southerners who gave it. The party quietly shifts its propaganda. The old revolutionary operas are replaced with lavish historical dramas about stoic northern generals fighting southern rebels or corrupt Ming dynasty officials. The message is subtle but clear. The party is no longer the vanguard of the revolution, but the guardian of the northern soul. This is the ethical crisis you face. The ideology is a lie. You know it. You are a history student. You know the North has been just as corrupt, just as brutal as the South. You know this purity is a fantasy constructed to make subjugation feel like a moral victory. Yet, the lie is seductive. It is a balm on the open wound of your pride. It feels good to hate the Southern manager who smirks at your provincial accent. It feels righteous to see the glittering, decadent world of Shanghai not as a success, but as a spiritual cancer. The movement gives your generation a purpose, not to build, but to resist, to purify, to endure until the day of reckoning. You find yourself one evening in front of the Forbidden City. For your parents' generation, this was the ultimate symbol of feudal oppression. For you, it has become something else. You look at its massive, silent walls, its soaring, unsentimental architecture, its deep, earthy red colour. It is a symbol of everything the South is not: permanence, order, stoicism, and a power that does not need to advertise itself with neon lights. It is the heart of the North, silent and enduring. That night, a protest is called. But it does not take place in Tiananmen Square, the stage for political demands. It is a silent march to the Temple of Heaven, the ancient altar where the emperors prayed for the good of the nation. Thousands of students gather. You are among them. There are no banners demanding democracy or freedom of the press. There is only one massive hand-painted banner. It shows a simple, stylized drawing of the Yellow River. Below it are two characters: Beihun, the northern soul. You do not shout slogans. You stand in the cold, clear darkness, in the shadow of the great altar, and you sing. You sing old northern folk songs, songs of the earth, of famine, of endurance. It is an act of cultural defiance, a declaration of spiritual independence. You have found your voice again, but it is a voice that speaks a language of grievance and blood. The forced opening of the North has not created a generation of liberals. It has forged a generation of zealots, dreaming not of a shared future, but of a purified past. You are no longer hungry for bread. You are hungry for dignity, and you have been taught that you can only find it in the ashes of your neighbour's house. You are 45 years old, and you have a new name. To the government of the People's Republic of China, you are Comrade Liu Wei, Citizen Registration Number 4, 2010221950. To your family, the ones you have not seen in 46 years, you are still little Ming, the boy who was left behind. You are standing in the middle of a miracle of engineering and a monument to 4 decades of pain, the Wuhan Yangtze River Bridge. It is 1995. It is not the first bridge to span the Great River. The Southerners, with their boundless capital and engineering prowess, have built a dozen of them further downstream, connecting the heart of their Silicon Delta. But this is the first bridge to connect the two worlds. It is an umbilical cord of steel and concrete, reattaching the severed halves of a nation. For the northern government, it is a symbol of their self-strengthening modernization, a proof that they can build and progress on their own terms, even though the specialized steel and the advanced construction cranes were all bought at great cost from a Japanese Formosan consortium. For the south, it is a necessary piece of infrastructure, a way to more efficiently extract resources from their northern special economic zone. For you, it is simply the end of the longest journey of your life. Your journey began not with a grand political decision, but with a piece of paper, a letter smuggled across the river by a fisherman who still remembered the old ways. It was from your older sister. It took her 10 years to find you, tracing your path from your ancestral village, now a submerged part of a hydroelectric project, to the grim northern factory town where you ended up. Her letter was written in a spidery, unfamiliar hand, but her words collapsed the decades in an instant. She spoke of your mother's death, of your brother's success in the Southern Army, of the faces of nieces and nephews you have never met. She ended with a simple, devastating sentence. "Little Ming, we are old. Come home." The process of getting the permit to cross was a bureaucratic war of attrition. Months of applications, interviews with suspicious security officials, a lifetime of savings paid in fees that were clearly bribes. But the thaw, however resentful and uneven, is real. The two governments, for reasons of commerce and propaganda, have agreed to allow limited controlled family reunions. You are part of the first wave. You walk from the northern end of the bridge, from the city of Hanyang. Your side of the bridge is a study in grey concrete, grey uniforms on the grim-faced soldiers who check your papers one last time, a grey sky thick with the smog from coal-fired power plants. The air smells of sulphur and duty. As you reach the halfway point marked by a simple brass line embedded in the pavement, the world changes. The southern side of the bridge leading into the city of Wuchang is a riot of colour and noise. The guard posts are not concrete bunkers, but glass pavilions staffed by police in crisp, white and blue uniforms who seem more bored than menacing. Huge, vibrant billboards advertise southern consumer goods. Televisions, washing machines, skin creams. The air, while still polluted, carries a different scent. The unfamiliar tang of diesel from the thousands of trucks and cars, and the faint, sweet smell of street food frying in gutters. You cross the line. Nothing happens, no alarms, no sirens. You're simply on the other side. You see a family waiting for you, a small cluster of people holding a hand-painted sign with your childhood name. You recognize your sister instantly, even through the mask of age. Her face is a map of your shared past. The others are strangers. A barrel-chested man in a flashy, ill-fitting suit who claps you on the shoulder and introduces himself as your younger brother, now a mid-level manager in a shipping company. A young woman with dyed hair and too much makeup who is his daughter, your niece. She looks at your simple, northern-made clothes with a mixture of pity and revulsion. This reunion, the moment you have dreamed of for a lifetime, is not a joyous explosion of emotion. It is an exercise in profound, almost unbearable awkwardness. This is the unexpected, tragic twist. The bridge has connected two land masses, but it cannot bridge the chasm that has opened between two souls. You have nothing to talk about. They take you to a restaurant. It is a loud, garish place dripping with gold paint and mirrors. The table is laden with a dozen dishes, more food than you have seen in a year. Your brother talks loudly of his business deals, of the price of property, of the new car he's buying. Your niece is silent, tapping away at a small electronic device that beeps and chirps. Your sister tries to bridge the gap, asking you about your life in the north. But how can you explain it? How can you describe a life of ration cards, political study sessions, and the quiet, collective pride of shared hardship to these people? Your world is a foreign language to them. The concepts of the work unit, of self-criticism, of the northern soul, these are not just unknown, they are fundamentally incomprehensible. You, in turn, cannot comprehend their world. Their casual wastefulness is a physical offence to you. Their conversation, which revolves entirely around money and possessions, seems shallow, almost infantile. They are not bad people, but they are aliens. You look at your brother, a man who shares your blood, and you see a stranger whose values are the inverse of your own. This is the great ethical tension revealed by the opening. For 46 years you have been taught that these people were suffering, groaning under a capitalist yoke, waiting to be liberated. The propaganda was a lie. They are not suffering. They are by any material standard thriving. But you have also been taught that they are traitors who have abandoned their culture and their dignity for southern comforts. And as you sit there, listening to your niece complain about the speed of her internet connection, you feel a dark, unwelcome thought solidifying in your mind. Perhaps that part of the propaganda was true. You came home seeking connection, a return to your roots. But you have found that home no longer exists. The war has created two different species of Chinese. The bridge is not a symbol of reunification. It is a viewing platform at a zoo, allowing two profoundly different kinds of animal to stare at each other through the bars of their separate cages. That evening, your sister takes you to the riverbank. You stand in the shadow of the Great Bridge. The lights of the two cities, Wuchang and Hanyang, blaze on opposite shores. "We are one family, little Ming," she says, her voice thick with unshed tears. "We are." But you look at the water flowing beneath the bridge, the same dark, indifferent water that has divided you for your entire life, and you know with a certainty that breaks your heart that she is wrong. You are not one family, you are the ruins of one. You are in the control room of a satellite launch facility, but you're not in Houston, Baikonur, or even Shanghai. You're in a sterile white room buried deep in the mountains outside of Hualien, on the eastern coast of Formosa. The year is 2003. On the main screen, a rocket stands on its launch pad, silhouetted against a Pacific dawn. It is a sleek, elegant piece of engineering, emblazoned with the stylized plum blossom insignia of the Formosan National Space Administration. You are Li Tenghui, the elder statesman of your island nation, the man they call Mr. Democracy, though you have always considered yourself Mr. Pragmatism. You're 90 years old, and you have come to witness the culmination of your life's work. The rocket is launching a communications satellite, a state-of-the-art piece of technology designed and built here in the Hsinchu Science Park. But its true purpose is not to relay television signals. It is a declaration. It is the final, unanswerable piece of a grand strategic puzzle you have been assembling for 50 years. The world you inhabit is not defined by a simple bipolar rivalry between the United States and a unified China. That would be too simple, too stable. Your world is defined by what the political scientists at National Taiwan University have grimly dubbed the three-body problem. The three bodies are the People's Republic of China in the north, the Republic of China in the south, and your own Republic of Formosa. They are locked in a gravitational dance of mutual dependence and mutual hatred, a system with no stable, predictable orbit. The north is the first body, a vast, resentful, and increasingly potent power. Fueled by the Northern Soul ideology and financed by the careful, limited sale of its natural resources to Southern and Japanese corporations, it has rebuilt its military. It has nuclear weapons, a legacy of Mao's defiant isolation. Its society is a strange hybrid creature, a Leninist state structure overlaid with a hyper-nationalist, almost fascistic culture, and powered by a ruthlessly controlled, export-oriented crony capitalism. It is a Spartan, paranoid, and dangerous state, obsessed with its past humiliations and dreaming of a future reckoning. The South is the second body, a glittering, arrogant, and dangerously hollow giant. The Silicon Delta has made it preposterously wealthy, a global hub of finance and technology. But its political structure has never matured beyond the corporate feudalism of the warlords of the Bund. Its army is a high-tech plaything of its corporate masters, designed more for internal repression and protecting assets than for national defence. Its society is a spiritual vacuum, a playground for the super-rich and a holding pen for the rest. Its only unifying principle the pursuit of wealth, and a terrified contempt for the poverty of the north. It is a fat man in a silk waistcoat sitting on a pile of gold in a house made of straw. And you are the third body, Formosa. You're small, but you are dense. You are the pivot point, the fulcrum. You are not the world's workshop like the South. You are its brain. While the South perfected the foundry model, becoming the world's master of mass-producing other people's designs, you took the next harder step. You invested everything, your money, your culture, your very identity, in research and development. Your companies do not just make the chips, they design them. The beating heart of every advanced computer, every southern smart device, every Japanese robot is a microprocessor designed in Hsinchu. You have made yourselves the indispensable intellectual link in the global supply chain. This is the unexpected apotheosis of your historical path. You have turned your strategic ambiguity into your ultimate weapon. You have formal defense ties with the United States. You have deep, unbreakable economic and cultural ties with Japan. And you are the single largest foreign investor and technology provider to the South. Both Chinas need you more than they need each other. The South needs your technology to fuel its economy. The North, in a supreme irony, secretly buys your advanced machine tools and processors through shell companies in Hong Kong because they are the only way to modernize its military to face the South. The countdown reaches its final seconds. Zan, Ir, Chi, Yi, ignition. The rocket rises, a clean white spear of flame against the blue ocean. It is perfect. You watch it ascend, and you reflect on the terrible, delicate balance you have created. This is your life's masterpiece of statecraft. You have kept your island free. You have made it prosperous beyond your wildest dreams. You have achieved this not through military might, but through the strategic creation of mutual dependence. You have made Formosa the one piece on the board that no one can afford to lose. But as the rocket disappears into the high atmosphere, a profound, chilling thought, the final ethical tension of your world, settles upon you. The three-body problem is a concept not just from political science, but from physics. And in physics, the three-body problem is the definition of chaos. It is a system that can never reach equilibrium. It is inherently, mathematically, doomed to fly apart in a burst of unpredictable violence. You have not created peace. You have created the most elegant, complex, and dangerous stalemate in human history. The South's arrogance, the North's resentment, and your own island's delicate indispensability, it is a structure of breathtaking beauty, and it is fundamentally, terrifyingly unstable. Any small perturbation, an economic crash in Shanghai, a leadership struggle in Beijing, a miscalculation in Taipei, could cause the entire system to collapse into a war that would make the old civil war look like a border skirmish. You have spent your entire life trying to escape the gravity of China, and you have succeeded only in placing your beloved island at the precise gravitational centre of its divided, warring heart. You're no longer a pawn, you are the king, but you are a king on a chessboard that is perched on the edge of a volcano. The satellite you have just launched is not a symbol of your independence. It is a sentinel placed in the heavens to watch over a world you have made safe for the moment, but perhaps damned for all time. You pull back from the world you have just walked through, and the familiar contours of your own timeline swim back into focus. The sense of dislocation is acute. In the world you just left, the river was a wall. In ours, the Kuomintang was swept from the mainland, an entire political and economic system exiled to an island it would rule, with an iron fist for 40 years. In that world, China was a wound, cauterized down the middle, leading to the growth of two monstrous opposing pathologies, a hyper-capitalist South and a hyper-nationalist North. In our world, the wound was the flight to Taiwan, creating a different but no less painful schism. The trade-offs are stark, and they offer no easy comfort. The world of the two Chinas avoided the vast self-inflicted holocausts of the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution as we knew them. Millions who starved or were murdered by the state in our timeline lived. But this salvation was purchased at a terrible price. The South became a gangster capitalist paradise, a society of profound inequality and spiritual emptiness. The North, its revolution shamefully incomplete, curdled into a resentful, paranoid state whose ideological ferocity was arguably even greater for being so concentrated. A unified Korea was bought with a brutal political purge. The Vietnam War became an endless, low-grade infection rather than a raging fever. Is a quick death better than a slow one? The historian offers no answer, only the question. What was lost was the dream of a unified China, a concept that, for all its brutal manifestations in our own timeline, provided a powerful, coherent narrative. In its place arose a permanent civil war of the soul, a nation defined by its opposition to itself. Formosa, the great success story of that timeline, achieved its de facto independence and prosperity by performing an act of radical historical surgery, severing itself from the mainland and becoming a unique, brilliant but dangerously isolated civilization. In our world, its fate remains deeply, tragically entangled with the mainland it fled. There is no better timeline, there is only a different one. The ghosts of history are not exorcised, they simply find new houses to haunt. The world of the Yangtze Compromise reminds us that history is not a morality play. It is a series of complex interlocking systems where a solution in one area creates a crisis in another. A peace that saves lives in the short term can plant the seeds of a much larger, more intractable conflict a generation later. It is a world that traded the famines of Mao for the soul-crushing anomie of Shanghai, the chaos of the Cultural Revolution for the cold, resentful purity of the northern soul. It forces us to ask the most difficult of questions. What is the true price of stability, and is it a price we are ever willing to pay?